a grand summation of the human condition, which is that we are fundamentally suspended in paradox. I was reading a book called Maps of the Mind, where different philosophers and psychologists kind of present their case for making sense of the human condition, the human paradox, suspended between mortality and divinity, simultaneously gods and worms. And so what was articulated is that to be human is to be suspended in paradox. And the problem is that our ignorance comes from living in a black and white world. Our ignorance comes from living in a world of yes, no, living in a world of polarity, living in a world where we are confounded by the impossibility of being both mortal and divine. And yet, living in a world in which we pay no attention to the fact that we live in paradox is to be asleep. It's not to be awake. You know, the Western material worldview, while great at mapping the physical contours of reality, it leaves no room for interiority and paradox. And so to live in a world of thesis and antithesis at war with each other, contradictions, right? Paradox, confusion, anxiety, agitation. A world of thesis and antithesis leads to war, conflict. But a world that embraces paradox, that embraces synchronicity, that embraces that we don't know what we don't know, is a world in which thesis and antithesis, seemingly irreconcilable, are resolved by synthesis, which is a higher level order understanding, a higher dimension that makes room for paradox, a rational world in which irrational forces exist, a rational world in which mystery is real. You know, like a Venn diagram. Seeming opposites are reconciled by a higher level understanding. Thesis and antithesis are resolved by synthesis. In this case, structure and chaos. Oh, structure, too much. Oh, chaos, too much. Oh, no, but guess what? Balance, you know? Or like discipline. Oh, no, surrender, forever at war. Oh, no, flow resolves that paradox. Higher level understanding, a place where discipline and surrender meet. Thesis and antithesis converge, are reconciled by synthesis, higher level understanding. And that is the human condition. So seemingly the paradox of living in paradox, of being suspended in paradox, and somehow being unable to hold that all at once. How can I be both mortal, finite, and also a god? How can I be suspended in paradox? How can I live in a world in which I am food for worms, but also divine light, a world in which I am music and dance, seemingly sprouting into existence in every moment? And that idea is given, that idea is surrendered to, is finally resolved, reconciled in artistic expression. I think art is where our divinity and our mortality is manifest. Gods on stage, gods and worms, gods with anuses, but gods nonetheless. Blood, sweat, and tears on stage, showing what is divine within us. Like characters on screen, beings made of light that are also aging and dying. We are suspended in paradox, but we resolve that paradox through art. Art is where our divinity and our mortality meet. Creativity is where our divinity and our mortality meet. Synchronicity is where our divinity and our mortality meet. When the objective world and the narrative world touch, as Jordan Peterson said. And I know that is real, because I've experienced it. The felt reality of direct experience, or what the Greeks call katalepsis, a truth from which nothing can dislodge you. A truth from which nothing can dislodge you. To know this, I think, is to know God. To know this is to know awe in quaking, annihilating glory. To know this is to know the birth of stars and the birth of gods. To know this is everything. You know, to know this is everything. And I think that's the place where I arrive in all of my wrestling, finally, in leaping into the abyss and realizing that it's a featherbed. It's believing that the paradox can be resolved, that suspended between our mortality and our divinity is us, our humanity. So that's what I wanted to share. Thanks for listening, guys. You guys are Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was feeling it. I was feeling it.
No, don't be sorry.
That's like, yeah. Cool, yeah.